Hey everybody, this is Cannaday, and today I'm taking a look at the gigantic game Dune: War for Arrakis. This is highly asymmetrical. Are you going to be the side of the Atreides and the Fremen trying to take out the evil barony, or are you going to be on the side of the Harkonnen basically trying to crush the Fremen and the Atreides in their sieges and lay waste and claim Dune for your own? Let's take a look at what I think. So Dune: War for Arrakis is a gigantic game, so I'm not going to be able to get into the nitty-gritty details of every little aspect of the game, like how to play or anything like that, but I just want to give you a feel and a flavor for how the game works. This game is extremely asymmetrical, with the Harkonnen trying to take over the different sieges of the Atreides, and the Atreides are going to be trying to take over research stations and go up on the prescience track by completing different prescience cards and gaining victory points that way just by going up that track. And then the Harkonnen, of course, are going up their supremacy track. An interesting thing to note about setup is that the Harkonnens have all of their units kind of displayed out on the board. You will have tokens that you're going to put in each of these settlements, basically, that you're going to be flipping up, and then this shows the icons on there that you're actually putting out, but those are revealed. But the Atreides have all of their stuff on tokens that are face down, so the Harkonnen player is not going to know exactly what the Atreides are going to have in each of their sieges, but the Atreides player can look at those at any time to kind of know, okay, I have two basic units there, okay, I have an elite unit in this one, so it's a little bit stronger. You can see where to protect. All right, so as far as the point of the game, the Harkonnen are going to be trying to take over these different sieges. Different sieges are going to have different strengths on them as well. So there are tokens underneath here, which the Atreides are allowed to look at any time as well. They come in 1, 2, and 3 strength. These will basically be the number of supremacy points that the Harkonnen get if they are actually able to conquer that siege, but also this is going to give the Atreides strength in combat when they're defending that siege. So we'll talk a little bit about that when we're talking about combat as well. The point of the game for the Atreides is to try to go up on these prescience tracks, and the number that you need to win will be based on your secret objective card. So you're going to shuffle these up and have one of these at the beginning of the game, and this will basically be the number that you need to be on each of these tracks to actually win. So you would need 9 in the green, 6 in the yellow, and 4 in the red. Green is more like the different mystical things, or like drinking the water. Yellow is going to be, I think, more of like bringing the Fremen onto your side, and then the red is going to be more of like doing military combat and blowing up Harkonnen things. But to gain those, you're going to be completing these different missions here. So you have these prescience cards that you're going to be looking at. This one says, have an Atreides Legion destroy 2 harvesters in the same turn. And this can resolve during the action phase. And this would give you 2 on the red track, which would go for half of our goal that we need for a red here. That would be amazing. But you do note this has to be actual Atreides legions, and you can't destroy it with sandworms. So you have to be very careful about that as well. And then this one is Jessica trains Paul in the way. Jessica and Paul are in the same siege. So if you're able to get both those leaders in the same siege, by the end of the round, you'll be able to trigger this and gain 2 there. And then here is one for yellow. This one says, New Sardea. If Jessica is in a sector not containing a Harkonnen Legion, spin 1 action die to place Jessica in the regeneration tank. So you can basically kind of destroy Jessica or send her to the regeneration tank, and you get 3 on this, which would be great for half of the yellow that we need. So you can only complete 2 of these each round, so you have to kind of pick and choose which ones you're kind of going for, and you will be going up this track as that goes along. You can unlock different leaders as you get here. You unlock Paul's sister, and if you get up here, you have family atomics where you blow up the shield wall, which makes it easier for worms to attack the Harkonnen. Well, let's look at the Harkonnens' supremacy track over here, and they are trying to race all the way up to get to 10 victory points, and they're going to get several things by doing that. And mostly the main way they do that is by going up and destroying sieges, and they get the number that's on here. The ones I keep revealing are 3s. There's only 2 3s, but there are 2s and 1s and 3s underneath these sieges. If you're actually able to take them over, you will go up on this track. Of course, each time you get to one of these red spaces, you're going to unlock different leaders. If you get to these spaces, you're going to be giving the Atreides player some of the the Bene Gesserit tokens, which are going to allow them to have better action, so a little bit of a catch-up mechanic there. But if you get all the way to 10, you're going to actually win the game. If you are below 5, you are able to spend spice to gain this at the end of the round, which we can talk about the spice stuff here in just a second, but that is the ways that you win the game for both sides. So very asymmetrical, taking over sieges and then completing these things. Another thing about the Atreides players is also if they're able to capture the research stations, they're going to flip those tokens over and get one of a specific type. They don't know which one it is, and the Harkonnens don't know which one it is either, but they're going to be able to go up on the prescience track for taking over those research stations. So the Harkonnens don't want them to grab too many of those either. So we're going to go a little bit through the game round here. So the first thing that happens is we draw 2 planning cards from each deck. So both players are going to do that. You have decks of cards on both sides, and the Harkonnen would draw their 2 cards, and these would be cards in their hand that they could use. Normally you're going to be spending action dice to use these cards. And then you reveal the 3 prescience cards, the ones that the Atreides player are going to be using to try to win the game. And then after that, we're going to do vehicle placement. So the Harkonnen gain vehicles based on where they are on the Spice Must Flow track. At the beginning of the game, everybody starts here and they will get, or the Harkonnen start here, they will get 2 of the little sand crawlers, 2 of the ornithopters, and 1 carryall. So you'll be able to place those out. So there's interesting stuff with placing these things. The ornithopters are basically going to be able to allow the Harkonnen player to have extra movement. So they're going to be able to move 2 spaces instead of just 1 if you have an ornithopter basically adjacent or in the sector that they are in. So say we want to put this ornithopter over here in this space, so that way these guys, or potentially even these guys, have an opportunity to maybe move to one of these sieges. It just makes them have a little bit better movement. And so you could place both of those out and say we're going to be placing our sandworm things here, or our not sandworm things, but our crawlers to be able to gain spice. If you place them in an area that is not the edge of the board, you can place them in any of these sand areas, which sand areas are all around the board. The spaces in the middle here, they are not in the area here or up here. But if they are in a place that's not touching the edge of the board, they will gain 1 spice each, but it's less likely for them to get attacked by sandworms. If they are touching the very edge of the board, they will gain 2 spice each, but it is much more likely that they're going to be attacked by a sandworm. And then you also have the carryall, which can help protect those. If they do get destroyed, you'll be able to have one of these, be able to save it, so that way it still gets spice. And you can place those once again on the spaces here that you can place your basically flying things. This will block it so that the ornithopter can't go there, but this will help me protect these guys over here as Harkonnen. So hopefully I'm doing this so that way we can get extra spice to be able to keep the Empire happy. A lot of strategy in placing these vehicles overall, mostly to try to gain spice so that way you don't end up getting any of these Imperial bans. If you're not collecting spice properly, these tracks are going to go down, and you're going to basically have different bans and restrictions placed on you, like limiting the number of units you have. You won't be able to take scouting action, so you can't figure out what's in the different sieges, and then also not being able to discard planning cards in combat. So just making the Harkonnen worse overall, and you'll be losing dice as well. So you want to place your crawlers so that way they can definitely collect you spice, so that way you're not going down on that. You will get more vehicles as this goes down though. So as you're getting worse at collecting spice, the Empire is like, hey, you need to get out there and get more spice. So you end up putting more and more efforts towards getting that. But the Atreides player have a vested interest in slowing you down. Also, if you collect spice, you can spend 3 spice to move this back up. You can spend 2 spice to move it, leave it where it is, or no spice to it will move down. This will happen at the end of the round, but also if you're able to get to the point of spice, you can spend spice to basically gain supremacy points as well. So, and you can only do that when you're lower on the supremacy track. But yeah, that is some of the reasons and the ways you get to place out the vehicles. Then we come to the crux of the game, which is the action resolution phase, where each player is going to roll their action dice and place them on the corresponding place on the board. So there are several different types. There are leadership, there is strategy, there is deployment, which allows you to put more units. There is house, which is kind of like a little bit of a wild, but can do other things as well. And then there is mentat as well. So that allows you to play cards and get more planning cards. And then the Atreides player will do the same thing. The Atreides players would roll their dice. They only have 4, so much less dice than the Harkonnen player. They'd put their dice out there, some leadership, some strategy, a Mentat, and then they do start the game with a Bene Gesserit token. They can also gain more of these by the Harkonnen player going up on their supremacy track, but they can choose at the beginning of their round to be able to put this in one of the areas here. Let's say they want to put it on deployment because they didn't roll any deployment dice. You have to put it on one of the things that you don't have dice in. Also, with the Harkonnen player, if they roll more, or even the Atreides player, if they roll more than the number of spaces here of the same symbol, they would have to change it to one of the symbols that they don't have, kind of allowing you to plan out your turn. So let's talk about the action dice here. So from this point in the game, starting with the Atreides player, you're going to be going back and forth doing different actions. So you have leadership, which allows you to move 2 different legions with a leader. So anytime you have one of the leaders on the board, you can move a legion. For the Atreides players, they have these face down legions that would move along with them. At any time, they're allowed to flip these face up and be able to actually put those units out. Say you want to split that group up and leave some guys behind, you could do that. And then there is strategy, which allows you to move 2 different legions, so you don't even have to have a leader with them, you just get to move units on the board. Deployment allows you to deploy. Atreides is kind of interesting because they're going to be deploying randomly out of this bag. If you spent that, you would do this and you put it at a, with either a leader, deploy token, you get to put a leader and a deployment token in the same siege. So you have one of these that you would put face down. You would be able to look at it after pulling it out of the bag. You would see that, oh, this would be 2 of your basic units for that. And you have a certain number of those in the bag, which is going to correspond to all of your different units that you're going to have for the Atreides player. You have a whole bunch more units that you can add in on your side of the board if you're able to do a whole bunch of deployments. The next thing here is Mentat. Mentat will allow you to draw 2 planning cards, which of course these cards can be super powerful things, which can allow you to do all sorts of different game effects. And you can spend dice to play these actions. You can also discard them in combat to get extra dice. And then the house result, you can use any result of any action. So this is kind of your wild, which allows you to do your other actions. And then the Fremen have a very specific one here, which is huge for them. This is desert power. This doesn't require any dice to do. It just says you can only take this action if you have fewer unused action dice than your opponent, which will happen quite often because we have 4 plus the Bene Gesserit one here. This one counts as a die for counting that. But the Harkonnen player over here has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 dice that they're going to be using. So we'll be able to do Desert Power for a while. Desert Power is going to allow you to put out worm sign tokens. And this is a huge deal for the game because these are basically how the Fremen are going to be able to get extra movement. The Harkonnen are getting extra movement with their ornithopters. The Fremen are getting extra movement by putting out worm sign tokens and being able to use those kind of as a bridge when they're moving. So yeah, we'll just kind of talk about this a little bit. Whenever you're doing movement, like say you took a leadership action, if you have worm sign tokens out on the board, let's say we have some over here, maybe we wanted to try to get to this research station and we put a couple of worm sign tokens out. Just to see what was going to happen. We could then, or put it here, we could say, oh, we're going to be able to move these guys here for 1 movement. You don't even have to have one here. You just treat the space that you're moving through that has worm sign as not actually being there. And you could do that with a leadership action or with a strategy action. Leadership allows you to do with leaders, and then the strategy action allows you to move 2 different legions. There also, the leadership action can allow you, or the deployment action can allow you to play out your actual leaders, which will put these guys in the game. If you put Paul in the game, you can then do the green action on here, which is place Paul in any legion and then move 2 different legions with the leader, so allowing Paul to kind of move around the board even better. If you ended up getting this leader into play, you can then move 3 different legions instead, which is awesome. So Stilgar's there, he can lead people even better. If you got Jessica into play with deployment, you'll be able to draw 1 planning card and then play 1 planning card. So instead of just drawing them, you can actually play them, draw them and play them, which gives you just more options for your planning cards. So there's all sorts of different actions you can take here. But yeah, another part of the desert power action is the fact that you can move 2 sandworms. As the game goes along, these tokens at the end of the round are going to start to get flipped. And when they're flipped, if it shows a sandworm on it, a sandworm would actually appear on the board. And you can still move through sandworms as the Atreides player, just like it was a worm sign token, so they help for movement. They can also be used to attack the sand crawlers. If you're able to do a worm sign action, you can use it to move into the spaces and take these things out. Also, if they pop up where they are, they would take them out immediately. And then also you can attack with the sandworm. So say there were some Harkonnen Legion units out on the board, then you could make a sandworm attack, and then you would roll on a thing on the perils of Arrakis here. For these sandworms, you would roll 4 dice, and for each hit result, you would take 1 wound, and then depending on where you're at in the desert, you would take more wounds. If you're in the deep desert, it'd be worse. Sandworms are more ferocious out in the deep desert, that sort of thing. So yeah, this desert power action is a big part of the Atreides player because it allows them to do movement and control the worms. Harkonnen player has actions that are very similar to the Atreides, but they just have way more of those actions. So they're going to have leadership, which allows them to move 2 different leaders or legions with leaders in them. They have strategy, which allows them to move 2 legions with a leader as well, so very much the same sort of thing. And then they have deployment, which allows them to do even more, so they get to deploy 3 regular units and a leader in one of their settlements. And you can do a named leader as well. Of course, getting these leaders into play is going to allow you to have more abilities. And then they have Mentat, of course, which allows them to draw planning cards. And then they have their house icons here, which the house icons come with the Baron. If you get him into play, you can basically start upgrading your regular units with elite units. You can also place more vehicles on the board, which can get you more sandcrawlers to get you more spice, also can get you ornithopters out there to give you more movement. These things can be very important when trying to figure out how to move your units around to attack sieges and to build up your spice refinement so that way you can get more supremacy and be able to keep your spice must flow in check, because if you're not able to deliver spice, you're going to get all those mean sanctions on you. Point of the game for the Harkonnen is very much to be taking over these sieges. So say they had taken a strategy action to move 2 legions, and they had maybe said, oh, we're going to consolidate, some of these guys are going to move over into this one. You have a max of 6 units in the same space, and that is not including the leaders. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we had done this to move, and then on a different strategy action, we had maybe moved all of these guys over to here. Then on a future turn, we could then have a leadership action. If you're attacking with a leadership action, you're basically about to get a surprise attack, which is going to give you extra symbols, like basically the leadership symbol in combat. But because there's an ornithopter here, I could say, oh, I'm going to do leadership, and I'm going to move all of these guys to attack. We'll kind of show you what a Harkonnen attack would look like against a Fremen siege. And hopefully, if you would see, well, actually, let's say this was over here, and they're actually trying to attack the siege area, and they were able to get their movement together to make that happen. Basically, the first thing that would happen is when you move in here, the siege would be revealed and show the strength of it. So this is a 2. And then this would be revealed and show the actual units there. So there would be an elite and a special elite. Whenever you move with an ornithopter, that ornithopter would come off the board, and the Fremen special elites are called, Fadakin or something like that, along those lines. Fadakin, yes. And then the special elite units, which are the ones with the hex bases, for the Harkonnen are the Sardaukar, which I recognize that name even more. If we're starting combat here, this would be started by the Harkonnen, and they have 6 units here, so they're going to roll 6 dice. And if they attacked with a leader, it would be a secret attack, so they would be rolling all 6 of these dice. The Fremen have 2 units, so normally it would be 2 dice, but because they're attacking a siege, and the siege has 2 on it, they're going to get 2 more strength there for their dice. The leaders are going to be triggering, basically, if they roll the leadership ability on this, they'll be able to trigger that. Because this was a sneak attack, the Harkonnen are going to be able to add one of those symbols to their final result. So both sides would roll their dice and try to be getting hits in combat and defenses to stop the opponent's hits. So the Fremen would have rolled 3 hits there, knocking out 3 things here, and then a shield. Do note that the Fadakin and the Sardaukar will ignore one of the defenses from each side. So for this Sardaukar, we'll get rid of this defense, and for this Fadakin, we'll get rid of this defense. So then we have to look at what we have here for the result. The normal leaders all basically add 1 extra hit with the special ability symbol. So there is a massive amount of damage over here with the Harkonnen player because we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Each leader can only trigger this once, so even though we technically got a bonus one of these, we can't trigger that again because we only have 1 leader. So this would be able to have enough to knock out the 2 units, but on the other side, we're going to be attacking back with 3, and then well, we can downgrade these units. Anytime you have an elite, you can take damage by downgrading it. So I'd be able to replace this out with just a regular unit, which are the ones with these circle bases on them. But there's enough damage here to continue to take out everything that the Fremen or the Atreides would have there. But they would still attack back and be able to do damage, so the Harkonnen player could downgrade all 3 of their elites into regular guys, or they could keep elites because they're very good for continuing combat, and they could just get rid of their regular guys. And then they would be able to take over that siege. They would be able to claim the 2 points here, and anytime they go up on their track here, you would check if they unlocked any leaders. If they passed the little red spot here, they would unlock this guy, so they'd be able to have a new character for their basically their Mentat section of the board, so they can do better on planning cards. But yeah, and that is 2 of the points that they need out of the 20 to win the game by taking over one of those sieges. And this is going to happen a lot with the barony. They're going to be smashing and crushing the Atreides with overwhelming forces, but the Atreides the whole time are trying to figure out how to complete those prescience cards. If the Fremen are able to muster up enough strength to be able to take out a Harkonnen stronghold, like say they had moved in here to attack and maybe they had Muad'Dib on their side, allowing them to have some extra combat because he can be a beast in combat, and they were actually able to take out one of the Harkonnen strongholds in combat by being the aggressors, they would then take over that stronghold and they would go up 1 spot on the prescience track in each color, which can be huge, of course, when you're trying to get that secret objective. If you're able to actually find a way to take over any of the Harkonnen strongholds with the Atreides, which is a little bit more rare because the Harkonnens normally are outnumbering you in forces, but if they leave things undefended, you're able to take those out. Also, if you're able to take over the research stations and you're able to move into them, you will flip those over, of course, and then gain the prescience on that as well. Anything you move up on the prescience track is good for you, especially if it has to do with the colors that you currently need. Around the Atreides is also going to have these different prescience cards in play. They're going to have 3, and they're going to do all sorts of different effects. This is like Paul drinking the water of life. If Paul is in a sector not containing a Harkonnen Legion, you can spend an action die to place Paul in the regeneration tank. And this can be done as an action during the action resolution phase, so it's really hard for the Harkonnen to stop this sort of thing. But some of the other things might be a little bit easier for them to stop. So reveal a siege in the same area as Paul. So this is basically giving the Harkonnen information by revealing the siege and showing the points that are actually on it. But if you see Paul in a certain space, maybe the Atreides try to jump in there and knock out Paul before they're able to complete this. But they might end up revealing it and making it happen. But yeah, so that is some of the different prescience cards. They have all sorts of different things, basically just different missions that you have to do to run up that prescience track so that the Atreides can snatch victory. After the action resolution phase and all of the players have done all of their dice, then we're going to move over to the desert hazards phase, which is going to do some interesting stuff here. So one of the things that's going to happen is that we're going to put these worm sign tokens anywhere that there are Harkonnen units. Like say there were some Harkonnen units that were here, or any of the little sandcrawler things that are trying to gain spice. We're going to put those out all over the board, and then we're going to reveal every single one of them. So if it has nothing on it, then there's no sandworm there, and it will just be removed from the board. If it has a little mound here, if it is not on the very edge of the board, it would be nothing. If it is on the edge of the board, it would actually spawn a sandworm. If there is a crawler in that space, that crawler would be destroyed before the Harkonnen are able to get spice with it. But if there is a carryall there, you could actually remove the carryall to save that, so that way it doesn't get removed from the board. And so that way you could still gain your spice for it. But you would flip your other tokens and see if those were bringing out worms, and maybe the carryall won't be able to save all of them. These worms are also going to be very useful for the the Atreides player in the future because they can use them for attacks and also use them to move around the board. But yeah, so we'd reveal those, and if any worms are in spaces with enemy units here, they would basically be attacking them, or they would actually have to just move out of that space. You're also going to be rolling for the storms for each unit that is out on the board. You're basically going to roll dice, and depending on where they are, they take a certain amount of damage. So the hits, just a regular damage. If they're a special symbol, it depends on where they are on the board. If they are on the inner area, then if they're in the desert, it's going to be 1 hit. If they're in the deep desert, that would count as 2 hits, which would be a ton of damage. So the deeper you are in the desert, which deep desert is always the outside areas of the board, the worse it is going to be for the Harkonnen player. The Atreides player don't have to worry about that as much because they're used to and adapted to the desert. After you are finished with the desert hazards phase, then it is the spice harvesting phase. So any of the actual sandcrawler things that were able to survive are going to be moved off of the board, and if they're on an outer area, they're going to collect 2 spice. If they're on the inner desert area, they're going to collect 1 spice each. So if we had the 2 that survived, we would then be able to gain 2 spice. So we would know that we have 2 spice. We would go over to our spice must flow board here and then check out what all we can do with it. So all of these tokens are going to move down unless we do something. We could spend 2 spice to leave it where it's at. You can spend no spice to let them go down, and depending on which one moves down depends on which bands end up in play. Or you could spend no spice and then let the thing move down. If you move 3, you actually get to push it back up, which could each of these that's covered is going to lock one of your dice for the next action round, so you're going to have less dice to use. And if they move down that turn, you're going to gain a ban. Also, if you're less than 5 on the supremacy track over here, you're able to actually be able to spend 3 spice to move up on that, which of course is a huge part of the game. So getting to 20 actually lets you win. So say we gain just 2, we could say, oh, well, I'm just going to make the entire Imperium mad at me. I'm going to let all of these go down. We're going to end up locking one of my dice here, and I'm going to get all 3 bans. So I won't be able to discard planning cards during combat. That's one of the things I should have mentioned. If you have planning cards in your hand at the start of combat and you're rolling less than the maximum dice, you can discard these even not for their special ability. You wouldn't be using their special ability at all. You just get extra dice in combat, which of course could be huge if you're trying to win a pivotal combat. So you could no longer do that if you had that ban. This one says you can no longer take scouting actions. One of the actions you can take with the die is to be able to, or with an ornithopter, is to be able to remove them to just look at what is under a siege, allowing you to know not to go after the ones that have 1 on them and to go after the ones that have 3 on them so you can get lots of points. Then, of course, the charm one here is your legion limit is now 5. So if this ban comes into play, anywhere that you have 6 units on the board, you end up having to bring them down to 5. But you can also bank 1 spice for a future round, but it is only 1. So if I spent my 3 and I gained 4 overall, I could save 1 for a future round, gain all of these bans, but I still would go up 1 more point on the supremacy track, which is a huge part of the game, which would allow kind of like taking over a 1-cost siege there and allowing you to take that. But of course the Empire is getting mad at you. But a good thing to look at as well is that since these tokens are now here, any token that's here, I'm now going to get 4 crawlers, 2 ornithopters, and 1 carryall. And the worse things get, the more things happen. If it's here, you have all the Imperium bans, and you have all of these dice locked up, which is pretty rough for you because you don't get to overwhelm the Atreides with quite as many actions as you normally would be able to. So the game is going to continue back and forth till either the Harkonnen player has reached all the way up to the 10 space on the supremacy track, or the Atreides have reached all the way to meet their secret objective. If the Harkonnen player at any point gets to 10, they immediately win the game. The Atreides will reveal this if they have gotten to those spaces at the end of a round. So they actually have to be able to trigger off enough of their supremacy cards to be able to, or their prescience cards to be able to trigger this, or be able to take over enough stuff to be able to get to the point where they can actually fulfill this, reveal it, and they would then win the game. Also, a thing to note is when you go up to different spots on this track, you're going to be unlocking leaders for different side. Same thing as well as supremacy. So these give you all sorts of different cool abilities you can do. Also, if you get all the way up to the family atomics with any of your things here, you're going to blow up a portion of the shield wall here. You get to pick which one you want to take out, and this would then be giving you another opportunity to more easily get in there, because you could then put tokens out to be able to have worms actually go and attack up in the actual thing there. So very thematic and interesting ways for the Atreides to actually make a attack on the Harkonnen strongholds there, which could end up giving you a bunch of prescience. And I haven't seen it done yet, but I would love to see that sort of ending to the game, but that could be very exciting. But yeah, that is Dune War for Arrakis. Very thematic, lots of combat going on, riding sandworms, destroying the Fremen in their sieges. Let's see what I think. So just a little backstory for me first. I grew up watching the Dune movies with my dad. My dad quoted Dune throughout like my entire childhood. I grew up playing the old school Dune board game. I love the Dune IP. I love the movies. I love the book. I love all of that stuff. So I'm very entrenched in the lore and the theme. So take that as you will, because I really enjoy this IP. But also on top of that, one of my second favorite game of all time is War of the Ring, and this shares a lot of DNA with that. The things I want to say about this game is I love the asymmetry in it. I love the fact that one side, as the Atreides, is just feeling like you have to just hold on as you're trying to complete those different prescience cards and figuring out ways to outsmart your opponent, keeping an eye on those prescience cards and hoping they don't figure out ways to spoil your schemes of being able to trigger those. But at the same time, keeping an eye on the board and be like, the Harkonnens aren't stopping me from taking this research station, or they left that stronghold open, maybe I can jump and take it and gain a ton of prescience for taking that out. And then the Harkonnens are a completely different side. You feel so powerful when you're playing it, but you feel like your sandcrawlers are just going to get crushed by all these different worms. So you're trying to figure out how to manage spice, but at the same time figuring out how to crush the Atreides with all of your overwhelming forces. I have played both sides of this game, and I love the way that both sides feel. You just get to feel it to play a completely different game depending on which side you're playing on, and even though the actions are very similar, it's like, hey, you're using this die to move, hey, you're using this guy to do a strategy action, hey, you're using this guy to put more units on the board. Very simple stuff, and stuff that's very much a carryover from War of the Ring, which I love. But I love the fact that there's leaders that are tied to each of these things. If you're able to get those leaders on the board, you get extra and better actions. And if those leaders die, you're going to be taking away those actions. So you have to try to protect your leaders. Also, a lot of the prescience cards are going to like make you sacrifice your leaders or do different things with your leaders to be able to make those prescience cards trigger. And then you're also kind of doing these different like raiding missions as the Atreides to try to like take out the spice harvesters. And the whole time, as the Harkonnen, you're trying to figure out how do I produce spice so I don't lose more and more of my dice, so that way I can do more overwhelming military actions against the Atreides. But at the same time, if I don't, if they're taking over all my stuff and I'm focusing too much on spice, then I'm not going to be able to basically take over stuff the way that I want to. It's this tug of war and push and pull with your own side that you're like, do I gain spice? Do I attack? Do I push for this? Do I put out more harvesters? Do I put out more ornithopters? So that way I can take over more of the board. It's a very interesting game, and I love the theme fits so well. I love the fact that the characters have cool abilities that feel like stuff. When Paul ends up basically getting to a certain point on the thing here, he turns into Muad'Dib, and then he's controlling worms and like going out all over the board and basically taking over stuff as more of a like strong military leader. And then you have all of the different Harkonnen guys, which are gross and disgusting, just going out there just doing tons of damage to your opponents. It's very interesting and very exciting with the tug of back and forth on each side to try to take over sieges, to try to complete prescience cards. I love this game. I'm going to give this game a 10 out of 10. This is one of my favorite games of all time, and I have only played it a few times so far, so I really love it. And obviously, I was destined to love this game. I grew up with Dune. I love War of the Ring, and this really didn't disappoint. Like, I was skeptical going into this, and I definitely was worried that it wouldn't live up to my expectations, but I really enjoy it, and I love the box cover. I love the production. Simon has done an amazing job bringing the Dune universe to life and really giving me a game that feels like I'm playing Dune, where I'm riding sandworms or we're crushing the Atreides, depending on which side. You're trying to collect spice. You're doing all of the things that just makes it feel like Dune. So if you're into war games, I understand if you're not into conflict games, this might not be as much of your thing. But if you're into asymmetrical war-style games where you're chucking dice and blasting each other and trying to make the strategic decisions with how you're moving your troops and your armies, this is a great asymmetrical games. I love Dune War for Arrakis, and if you think you'd be interested in it, it's a big, gigantic game. It normally takes at least a couple hours to play, even if you know the game really well, but I really enjoy my play of it. And it comes with modules as well. I didn't talk about the Old Man of the Desert, which is this giant worm which you can put that allows you to move across the entire side there. And it also has like different futures or whatever, which allows you to have the Duke stay alive and allows you to have different setup for the game. So there's a lot of replayability there as well. Anyway, this has been my look. I've been definitely gushing about this. I love this game, Dune War for Arrakis. 10 out of 10 for me. Anyway, I've been Roy Cannaday, and I'll see you on the next one.